There is a version of you that dies tonight, or he survives another year. That decision is not made by fate. It is made in the next 20 minutes. Somewhere right now there is a man who looks exactly like you, talks like you, uses your name, and he is the reason your life has not changed. He is not your past. He is not your trauma. He is not bad luck. He is the one who wakes up, feels the pull towards something greater, and negotiates it down to something safe. He never says, "I am giving up." He says, "I will start Monday." He never says, "I am afraid." He says, "I am being realistic." Here is a claim that will make some of you uncomfortable. Your circumstances may have hurt you. They do not get to decide who you become from here. Two people can survive the exact same wound. 10 years later, one is still describing that wound to strangers as the reason nothing worked. The other used it as the reason he refused to stay small. The wound was real for both of them. Only one let it write the ending. Men history remembers as strong were not spared from hardship. They simply stopped letting the weakest version of themselves speak on their behalf. That is what today is about. Not motivation. Motivation is gone by tomorrow morning. Something that survives longer than that. Here is a question worth sitting with for a second before we go further. If nothing about your situation changed tonight, no new opportunity, no lucky break, no rescue from outside, would you still find a way to become the man you keep saying you want to be? Most people flinch at that question, not because the answer is no, because they have never actually asked it plainly before. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which daily habits are keeping your old self alive, and which ones finally bury him. Stay until lessons 6 and 7. They are the ones that decide whether everything before them was just information or actually changes something. Let us begin. You think you have a personality. Most of it is just a pattern you repeated so many times you stopped noticing it was a choice. I am not a morning person. I have never been disciplined. I am just an anxious person by nature. Every one of those sentences was probably true the first time you said it. It stopped being true a long time ago. You kept saying it anyway. Ask yourself something uncomfortable right now. When did you last actually test that belief instead of just repeating it? An actor who plays the same role for 30 years eventually stops leaving the costume at the theater. He wears it home. He answers to the character's name at dinner. Eventually, even his own children forget what his real face looks like underneath it. That is what happens with the excuses you carry. Somewhere early, a frightened younger version of you needed a reason for why he did not try. So he built a small identity to explain it. Not because it was permanently true, because it protected him from trying on purpose and failing anyway. You have kept renewing that identity every morning since, without ever checking if it still fits. Identity is not something you discover once and carry forever. It is closer to a callus, built through repetition, through friction. Do the same small action enough times and your mind stops treating it as a decision. It starts treating it as fact. One embarrassing failure, one careless comment from someone whose opinion mattered too much. One data point became a permanent verdict. Here is the part that changes everything. If a habit built the story, a habit can rewrite it. You do not need a dramatic new origin. You need one unremarkable action today that the old version of you would not have taken. Then the same one again tomorrow. Stop waiting to feel like a different person before acting like one. That feeling rarely arrives first. It arrives after. As evidence, once the actions already spoke. Tonight before you sleep, write down one sentence you use often to describe yourself. Then write down the exact moment you first said it. You will likely find it is younger than you think, and weaker than the power you have been giving it. Here is what most people get wrong about this exercise. They expect the moment to look dramatic when they trace it back. It rarely does. Usually it is something small. A teacher's offhand comment, a sibling's joke that landed wrong, a single bad week that got mistaken for a permanent verdict on your character. That is the part that should actually unsettle you. Something that small has been running your life quietly for years, not because it deserved that much power, because nobody ever went back to check. Go back and check. But if identity really is just a costume, something has to be holding it in place. Something has to keep you reaching for it every single morning without question. That something is comfort. Nobody warns you that comfort behaves like it has a pulse of its own. You think of comfort as an absence. No pain, no pressure, no demand. It is not an absence. It is a current, pulling you somewhere the entire time you were not paying attention. It rarely attacks directly. It knows you would fight back. So it offers small permissions instead. Skip today, you have earned a break. You can make it up tomorrow. Comfort gives you permission. Permission becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. Identity becomes your entire life. That chain takes about a year to complete and about a decade to notice. There is an old practice almost nobody uses anymore. Choosing discomfort deliberately on days when comfort was freely available. Simple food when more was within reach. Cold when warmth was one blanket away. Not to punish yourself. To find out what you will actually do the day comfort stops being optional. Most people discover their own weakness for the first time on the worst possible day. The job loss. The diagnosis. The sudden ending of something they built an entire identity around. That is the real cost of a life arranged around comfort. It leaves you completely unprepared for the one thing every life eventually delivers, regardless of how carefully you avoided it. Sometimes you are not tired. You are simply untrained for discomfort. And untrained is a condition you can fix. Think about a river. It does not fight the land in dramatic bursts. It just keeps moving the same direction, day after day, until stone that looked permanent has a canyon through it. Comfort works the same way in reverse. It does not defeat you in one moment either. It pulls gently toward the easier path, until years later you look up and do not recognize how far you drifted. Nobody drifts off course from one bad decision. They drift from 1,000 small ones that each felt too minor to matter. Choose one small discomfort today, not to prove anything to anyone watching. Just so the first real test of your character is not also the worst possible day for the results to come back weak. Notice something else about comfort while we are here. It never announces itself as the enemy. It always shows up sounding like self-care, like balance, like you deserve this. Those words are not lies exactly. They are just being borrowed by something that does not have your long-term interest in mind. Real self-care occasionally looks uncomfortable from the outside. It looks like the workout you did not want to do, the boundary you were scared to set, The early morning that cost you something in the moment and paid you back for years. Ask yourself honestly which one you have been practicing more often lately. But comfort is not the only thing keeping the old version of you alive. There is something more dangerous, something that makes weakness feel like freedom. Applause? Every time you are praised for the wrong reasons, you owe the crowd a piece of your future decisions. Nobody explains this trade when you are young. Perform for approval often enough, and the crowd starts holding shares in choices that were supposed to belong only to you. Should I take this risk? What will they think? Should I say what I actually believe? What will they think? Should I finally leave the situation quietly wearing me down? What will they think? Notice the question is never "Am I right?" It has been replaced by a permission slip signed by people who will forget this by next week. Approval feels wonderful the moment it arrives. A compliment lands like warmth. Agreement feels like safety. Nobody warns you that shaping decisions around that feeling trains you to need it a little more each time. It stops being a bonus and becomes something closer to a dependency. Do this tonight. Write down 3 decisions you made in the last year because you were afraid of what someone would think. Do not justify them. Just write them. Look at that list tomorrow morning with fresh eyes. You will likely notice the person who actually lived those consequences was you, not the crowd whose opinion you were protecting. Men remembered for their integrity often had access to enormous approval and still refused to let it steer them. If a man with an empire's worth of applause available would not let it decide his choices, it is worth asking what exactly is holding yours hostage by comparison. The crowd is not evil. It is simply not qualified. It has never lived a single day inside your specific life. Notice how different it feels the moment you make a choice you know is right, even though nobody around you understands it. No applause waits on the other side of that kind of decision. Just a quiet steadiness that does not need anyone's agreement to hold its shape. Take the vote back. Here is a small but telling test. Think of the last time you agreed with something out loud that you privately disagreed with. Not because you changed your mind. Because disagreeing felt like too much of a risk in that moment. That single small surrender rarely feels significant on its own. But multiply it across a year of conversations, meetings, and family dinners, and you get a person who has slowly gone quiet about everything that actually matters to him. Silence bought with approval is still a kind of debt. It just gets collected later, usually as regret. Say the true thing once this week, even if your voice shakes while you say it. But even without the crowd whispering in your ear, there is still a third force working against you. This one does not ask for approval. It asks you to retreat the instant something becomes hard. Comfort convinced most of us that struggle means something has gone wrong. The instant something becomes difficult, the body screams retreat like it is under real attack. It is not under attack. It is simply doing something it has never practiced. The obstacle in front of you is not an interruption to what you are building. It is often the exact material that builds it. Remove it completely, and you remove the one thing capable of shaping anything at all. A blacksmith does not treat fire as the enemy. Fire is the only tool that can turn raw iron into something strong enough to hold an edge. Many of us spend years running from that fire and giving it softer names. Stress, burnout, not the right time. Meanwhile, the stronger version of ourselves that could actually carry the life we want never gets forged, because we keep pulling out before the metal gets hot enough to change shape. Notice where this shows up in ordinary moments. The hard email left in drafts. The workout cut short right when it starts to burn. The conversation rescheduled because some part of you already knows how it will feel. None of these are really about the task. They are a small test of whether you retreat the instant something asks more of you than yesterday did. Discomfort is not a warning telling you to stop. It is a diagnostic. It shows you exactly where the untrained part of your character still lives. Every time you retreat from it, you keep that weakness comfortable. Every time you stay one extra minute, you starve it a little. Stop asking, how do I make this easier? Ask what this discomfort is trying to build in you. And let it finish. Here is something worth remembering the next time your body screams retreat over something that is genuinely just hard, rather than genuinely dangerous. Discomfort and danger feel almost identical in the first few seconds. Your nervous system was not built to tell them apart quickly. It was built to assume the worst and sort out the details later. That is useful if you are being chased by something with teeth. It is far less useful when the thing chasing you is a difficult conversation or a workout that has started to burn. Learning to pause for even 5 seconds before reacting is often the entire difference between a life spent avoiding discomfort and a life spent walking directly through it. 5 seconds. That is a small enough price for most of what you have been avoiding. There is one more thief working quietly through all of this. It does not ask for approval, and it does not demand comfort. It simply borrows your urgency and never gives it back. There is a lie hiding inside the word someday that has taken more from people than almost anything else. Someday sounds patient. It sounds responsible. It sounds like planning. Most of the time it is fear wearing a calendar. Draw 90 squares on a page right now if you have something to write with. Each one represents a month if you reach 90 years old. Cross out every square that has already passed. Most people are shocked by how few remain. This is not meant to scare you into freezing. Fear that leads to freezing is just another form of comfort in disguise. The point is simpler. A number you can see hits differently than a vague feeling of someday ever does. How many crossed-out squares were spent building something that still matters? How many were spent scrolling, arguing, waiting on a permission nobody but you was ever qualified to grant? The squares still open do not care how many were wasted already. They only care what happens next. Urgency that comes from pressure fades within a day. Urgency that comes from genuinely seeing your own limited time tends to stay. Because it is not really about fear. It is about finally taking your own life as seriously as you already know it deserves. Most people only find this clarity after frightening news from a doctor or standing at a funeral for someone their own age. Suddenly the arguments that felt urgent look embarrassingly small. The grudges look childish. The excuses look see-through. The tragedy is not that this clarity exists. The tragedy is how often it only shows up once it is almost too late to use for very long. You do not have to wait for a crisis to borrow that same clarity today. Try this before you move on. Name one thing you have been postponing for longer than 6 months. Not a small task, something that actually matters to you. Now ask why 6 months did not already feel urgent enough to act. Usually the honest answer has nothing to do with time at all. It has to do with fear wearing time as a disguise. Someday was never really about the calendar. It was always about avoiding a decision that felt too big to make today. Make it smaller. Take one step this week instead of the whole leap. The leap can wait for momentum. The first step cannot wait for anything. There is a reason waiting for the perfect moment never actually works. The perfect moment is not a real thing you are waiting for. It is a story your fear tells so that inaction feels like patience instead of what it actually is. Patience waits for readiness. Fear waits for permission that was never coming. But even once you feel that urgency, there is still one more obstacle standing between you and actually moving. It sounds nothing like fear. It sounds like good sense. This is the hardest lie to catch because it never arrives with an obvious emotion attached. Fear feels like fear. Sadness feels like sadness. A rationalization feels like nothing at all. It feels like clarity. It feels like finally being sensible after a period of unrealistic ambition. That is exactly why it works so well on smart people. The sharper the mind, the better the excuse it can manufacture. A weak excuse falls apart the moment you look at it. A well-built one comes with footnotes. You do not need more discipline. Maybe you do not. Maybe you need fewer negotiations with yourself. A trained thinker can be more dangerous to himself than an untrained one for this exact reason. He can defend his own retreat better than anyone else could. A person who simply gives up at least knows he gave up. A person who reasons his way out convinces himself there was never really a fight worth having. Here is the test. Genuine wisdom usually points you towards something slightly harder than what you were already planning. A disguised excuse points you towards something slightly easier while insisting it is the wiser path. Wisdom rarely feels convenient the moment it arrives. If a thought feels suspiciously comfortable and reasonable at the same time, look again before you trust it. Keep a short note somewhere you will actually see it. Not a long entry. One honest line every time you catch yourself retreating behind logic instead of admitting fear plainly. Over a few months, that short list becomes one of the most revealing documents you will ever read about your own mind. You will notice a pattern. The same handful of reasonable-sounding excuses repeat across completely different situations. Once you can name them on sight, they lose most of their power. A disguise only works the first few times you meet it. Here is the sentence worth remembering above every other one in this entire video. The most dangerous lie you will ever hear is not the one someone else tells you. It is the one you tell yourself in a calm voice, using your own best reasoning. At exactly the moment reasoning was never really the point. Think back to the last time you talked yourself out of something you now wish you had done. Replay the actual thought that stopped you. Notice how sensible it sounded in the moment. Notice how much smaller it looks now with distance. That gap between how convincing an excuse feels in the moment and how weak it looks in hindsight is the entire battlefield this lesson is about. Win that gap consistently, and almost nothing else in this video matters as much. Lose it consistently, and none of the other 6 lessons will save you. Write the excuse down exactly as your mind phrased it the next time you catch one. Read it back out loud. Most excuses cannot survive being spoken in your own voice, back to your own face. Everything up to this point has been about recognizing the forces working against you. What remains is the only part that actually matters: what you do with that recognition tomorrow morning. This is why so many people quietly give up on self-improvement after a few months. They were waiting for the fight to finally end. They expected a future version of themselves who simply stops being tempted by comfort, stops caring what people think, stops needing pressure to move at all. That version does not exist. Not for you. Not for anyone who has ever built something difficult and lasting. What exists instead is someone who has gotten genuinely good at winning the same small argument with himself, day after day, until winning it stops feeling remarkable and starts feeling like who he simply is. That is the actual finish line, not the disappearance of struggle. The quiet steadiness of someone who has faced the same weak argument so many times it barely bothers making its case anymore. You will still hear it whisper occasionally for the rest of your life. Skip today. You have earned it. Nobody would even know. The difference between who you are and who you are trying to become is not whether you still hear that whisper. It is only ever whether you still listen to it. Some mornings this will feel easy. Most will not feel easy at all. The version of you worth becoming is not built on the easy mornings. He is built almost entirely on the ones where showing up made no sense to anyone except him. There is a strange comfort hidden inside accepting this. You do not need to wait for a future version of yourself who finally has it figured out. That version was never coming anyway. What you need is smaller and far more achievable. One decision today made the way the version of you that you respect would make it. Then the same decision again tomorrow. That is genuinely the entire practice. Not perfection. Not permanence. Just a series of mornings where you choose to show up as the person you are building instead of the one you are trying to leave behind. Look back for a moment at everything this video has actually asked of you. Not grand reinvention. Not a new personality overnight. One honest sentence written down. One small discomfort chosen on purpose. One decision made without asking permission from a crowd. One postponed thing made smaller and started this week. One excuse caught in the act and named for what it was. None of that requires talent. None of it requires the perfect circumstances everyone keeps waiting for. It only requires doing it again tomorrow. Then the day after that. The old version of you was never defeated in some final dramatic battle. He simply stopped being fed. One ordinary morning at a time, until there was nothing left of him worth mentioning. That is not a small ending. That is the only ending that has ever actually worked for anyone. So here is where this actually leaves you. Every excuse you repeated was never a fact about who you are. It was a habit picked up once out of fear and never questioned since. Comfort was never neutral. It has been steering you the whole time. Applause was never freedom. It was a debt collected by a crowd that forgets your name by next week. Discomfort was never a warning. It was the exact material your character needed to take shape. Someday was never patience. It was fear wearing a calendar. The reasonable voice talking you out of hard things was never wisdom. It was the oldest trick your own comfort ever learned to play on you. And the work was never something you finish once. It is something you choose again. Quietly, tomorrow morning. None of this requires talent you do not already have. It does not require money or a perfect starting point. It only requires you to stop being so patient with the version of yourself that has been quietly holding the door shut. 7 lessons. One thread running through all of them. The enemy standing between you and the life you actually want was never out there. He has been sitting in the same chair you are sitting in right now, comfortable, reasonable, and very quietly winning by default every single day you do not challenge him. That changes tonight if you let it. The man reading these words still has a choice. If something in this reached you today, say it plainly in the comments. Which version of you is waking up tomorrow? Then go prove it.